In this video, I'm going to show you why student loan borrowers pay the highest taxes of anybody. And you're going to be shocked at how much taxes you're actually paying. And when you see how much in taxes you're paying in total, you might make some major changes in terms of how many hours you work or what type of schedule you do at work. So let's show you why student loan borrowers are in one of the highest marginal tax brackets of anybody out there. So the first is federal tax. So this is something that's very important to know about how progressive taxes work in America, right? So you've got a 12% bracket, you've got a 22% bracket, 32% bracket, and then you've got a top bracket. And you get taxed at higher rates the more money you make. So for most people, there's two big brackets to know about. About 60K of income, including a standard deduction, you'd be right around a 22% marginal bracket. And this is if you're single. And if you're making something like 200K, then you're at about a 32% bracket. So those are some numbers to know. So most student loan borrowers, most professionals would be simply in a 22% to 32% marginal bracket, somewhere in there, right? Now states also tax income. And, there are some workarounds for business owners, but if you, have significant state taxes you're paying and you own a house, you're probably pretty capped out at what you can deduct for state taxes. So most people that pay state taxes are probably going to be paying 5%, but it can go high if you live in California or something like that as 10% or even a little bit higher. Now, local taxes are something that you pay only in particular parts of the country, but there's more cities that charge local taxes than you'd think. A lot of places in Pennsylvania, New York City, San Francisco, these also happen to be places where there's a lot more highly educated people that tend to congregate there too, right? You don't have as many rural areas that don't require as high education levels that charge local income tax. Cleveland, I think, is another one. St. Louis was one when I was living there. So local taxes, luckily, are fairly modest when they get charged usually, but it can be something like 1% to 4%. Now, ACA tax, this is mostly charged on only investment income, so this is not necessarily going to be charged on wage income. But if you put money in a high yield savings account, you're making over 200K, that's going to get some extra taxes as well. So that's about 3.8%, but that's, again, only on the investment income that you've got. Now, FICA tax, that is something that, from an employee perspective, I believe it's about 7.65%. Just think about mid-sevens. Now, this gets capped out for Social Security once you're making about 160K or so. So when you're making 160K or above, you're not having to pay that, employee portion of the FICA tax anymore, although you do still have to pay Medicare tax. So the big thing that student loan borrowers get hit with is income-driven repayment. So if you're doing income-driven repayment, 10% as well on top of all this. So what happens if you sum all these up? So let's just pretend that we're a physical therapist making 80K a year, and we're going to sum up all of our tax rates. And let's just say you're a physical therapist in, I don't know, St. Louis with a 1% income tax rate. So 22 plus, I think Missouri is 5%, plus 1 plus FICA tax, which is 7.65, plus IDR. So that's a 45% marginal rate. We are not talking about somebody that's a hedge fund manager here. We're talking about a physical therapist helping people, probably working for a not-for-profit or government employer, making 80K a year. And for that, fifth day a week, every Friday that she works, that Friday she's losing 45% of all the income she makes on that fifth day a week that she works. Now, why did I say fifth day a week she works? Well, because that's what a marginal tax rate is, right? A marginal tax rate is not the tax rate charged on your entire income. That's effective tax rate. Marginal tax rate is charged on your next $1,000 earned. And so when you think about working 5 days a week, a full-time schedule, your highest taxes you pay is on that final day a week that you work, because that's, pushing you into a higher income tax bracket. So if you're losing nearly half of your income to tax, you'd want to look real hard at things that you spend money on that are not tax deductible. So suddenly you might think, well, maybe driving a brand new car is no big deal. I make a good income, right? But if you could pay maybe $5,000 for an around town car and rent a car when you go on long distance trips versus having a $600 a month car payment, that could make an enormous difference in your quality of life long term. Now, what if you were a California surgeon? So let's just pretend now that you're in a 32% bracket, and we'll take out that local income tax, but we're going to add in about 9%, I think, for California, maybe just 10 to round it up. And then the total tax rate for FICA is probably a little bit lower because you're not paying Social Security on that income above 160. So let's just say, just to pick a random number, that the average amount you're paying to Social Security is about 6 or so. Just because, again, you're not paying tax on that final bit of income that you're earning. But then let's say your federal rate is 32% for marginal rate. So you've got federal rate of 32, state of 10, total Medicare and Social Security of about 6, and income-driven repayment of 10. So if you sum all that up, that is 58. So that's basically 60%. So in this case, a student loan borrower that's a physician, surgeon, and San Francisco, let's say, if you're making some extra money moonlighting, right, bringing home some money, the government's earning more of it than you are. You're keeping 40% of it. The government's keeping 60%. And that's, again, because student loan borrowers are losing an extra 10% of their income to income-driven repayment. And that is an enormous loss, and that has enormous implications for how you need to think about things like retirement accounts, wanting to max out those pre-tax accounts, has enormous implications for whether or not you should work a 5th day a week. If you could be a lot more frugal in your housing or transportation choices, then you might completely eliminate the need to work 5 days a week if that's your typical schedule because of how high your tax bracket is. I think most people have no idea how much they're losing in taxes on that working, a full-time schedule, and how much, you would make a very similar amount from take-home pay, maybe working 3 or 4 days a week, that you'd make working 5 days a week if you're a student loan borrower. And remember that student loan programs like PSLF only require 30 hours a week of work. So you wouldn't necessarily have to work a very full-time schedule to qualify. So are you shocked by this? Are you kind of blown away that most student loan borrowers pay 40 to 60% of their income in taxes? If this is something that's shocking to you, please share. Please let us know. If you want to comment, what is your tax rate? You could share that in the comments. And you can also follow Student Loan Planner for more stuff like this. And just make sure that burnout is a real thing. You've got to really be careful. So to avoid burnout, a lot of times the answer is to reduce your spending that's not tax deductible so that you can cut back on your hours and enjoy life more. So comment, what do you think about this? What is your tax rate? And thank you for watching Student Loan Planner.